I remember how Jess and I met. It was my second year at university in San Diego. I always sat in the corner, quiet, calm, more interested in my laptop than in people. And Jess? She was the complete opposite, loud, bright, with a laugh so infectious that it lit up the whole room. I remember once in a marketing class, something happened to the projector. It wouldn't turn on, and the whole class was sitting there waiting. Jess, tired of waiting, asked loudly if anyone could help other than the professor who seemed stuck in the Windows XP era. I went over, fiddled with it for a couple of minutes, and fixed it. From then on, we immediately struck up a conversation. She invited me for coffee, and that's how we gradually became not just classmates, but partners in projects, and then in life. We dated like in a typical romantic comedy. Weekend trips to San Francisco, pizza at 2 a.m., walks under the stars. We dreamed together and made plans. I wanted to create software that would really be useful to people, and she wanted to build brands that would make them feel something. We were different, but together we looked like the perfect couple. I was stability, she was energy. After graduation, I quickly landed a job at a startup that grew into a serious company within a couple of years. Soon I had my own apartment in the suburbs, with a lawn, a dog named Bruno, and everything I could have wanted. Jess was building a career in marketing, going from simple texts to big clients. She shone at work and at home. We got married without any fuss, but with all our hearts. A wedding by the ocean, photos with a hashtag that got more likes than I could have imagined. Life flowed smoothly, like well-written code. I put 10, sometimes 11 hours a day into my work, immersing myself in tasks, reports, and projects. I loved spending my evenings at home. Peace and quiet, a bottle of wine, a drama-free TV series. Dinner wasn't just a routine for us. It was a way to maintain order. I needed that. I didn't demand it. I just got used to living that way. But then one day, everything changed. Once and for all. That evening, I was returning home after a long day at the office where the monitor blended into the ceiling and meetings followed one after another. Only one thought buzzed in my head. Home, silence, Jess, and dinner. The door opened, I stepped into the hallway, and immediately sensed that something was wrong. Usually when I walked in, I would smell fresh food, hear Jess laughing or the TV in the background. This time, silence, empty, and the air felt cold, as if someone had turned off the heat along with the mood. I walked into the living room. There she was, sitting on the couch, engrossed in her phone, leaning forward so that her face was almost hidden in the shadows of the lamp. She usually smiled when I came in, but now, nothing. No warm look, no sparkle in her eyes. Just fatigue and a kind of closed-offness. I threw my bag on the floor and said, "Hi, Jess. How was your day?" She looked up, but her eyes seemed foreign. The eyes that used to look at me with love and genuine interest now seemed to be trying to escape somewhere far away. She glanced at her phone and quickly closed the Messenger app as if afraid I would see it. Everything's fine," she replied curtly, but her voice was empty without its usual melody. I sat down next to her, trying not to show that I was alarmed. But inside, everything was boiling. An awkward silence grew between us like a thick wall. I tried to ease the tension. "Do you want me to order pizza or something from our favorite place? You look like you've been fighting all day." She nodded but didn't smile. Her face was expressionless, showing no emotion or mood. I caught myself thinking that this wasn't just fatigue. It was something else, something she was hiding. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. A message popped up on the screen. I didn't want to look, but my eyes involuntarily fell on the sender's name. Ethan. I hadn't heard of him. As if burned, I looked away, but I already understood everything. That same icy lump in my chest began to grow. "Ethan?" I asked cautiously, trying not to sound accusatory. "Who is he?" She hesitated, quickly closed her phone, and blushed slightly. "Just a colleague," she said, trying to remain calm. "We're working on a project together. We have a joint project. We spend a lot of time at the office." I nodded, but felt that her answer was too simple. Something didn't add up. "You look tired," I said gently. "Is something wrong? You can talk to me." She sighed, lowered her eyes as if choosing her words. Then she looked me straight in the eye and spoke quietly but confidently. "Nick, I know something has changed between us lately. It's not you. It's me. I feel like I'm losing myself, not the girl I was in college who was so full of life. Work, pressure, all these projects. I'm just trying to figure out who I am right now. I listened, trying to understand if there was any truth in her words that could explain how I felt. What about Ethan? I couldn't help asking. You say he's just a colleague. Are you sure? She smiled, this time more softly and naturally. Yes, Nick, he's just a colleague. We work together a lot, sometimes staying late at the office to discuss ideas, nothing more. I don't want to lose you, and you're the most important person in my life. I felt the tension inside me ease a little, but my doubts remained. Okay, I said, if that's the case, let's talk more. I want us to be honest with each other so we can get through this together. She nodded. We hugged, and in that moment, I truly believed that everything could be okay. But somewhere deep inside me, there was a quiet anxiety, like a cold spot that wouldn't go away. Something told me that this wasn't the end of our story. It was only the beginning. I lived with this strange, oppressive feeling, like a heavy stone on my chest that I couldn't shake off. Every day, I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, a figment of my imagination, a product of fatigue and stress. Maybe I was working too hard, my brain was tired, and that's why I was seeing things that weren't there. Maybe I was just getting myself worked up. Jess seemed completely immersed in preparing for the holidays. Our daughter Susie's birthday was coming up. She was about to turn 5. The whole house was filled with the joy of childhood. Colorful balloons, ribbons, invitations that Jess was carefully arranging on the table, guest lists, ideas for cakes and games. She was in her element. An organizer, a mother, a wife who wanted to make this day special. On top of that, we were getting ready for Easter, trying not to miss any family traditions. Jess talked about her plans, how to dye eggs, what dishes to cook, who to invite. She seemed so enthusiastic that I had almost no room for doubt. From time to time, I caught myself thinking, it's just anxiety in my head. There's no problem. She's just tired, like me. Every evening, when I came home from work tired and thinking about tasks and deadlines, the house greeted me with warmth and light. Jess was busy, either in the kitchen baking or with Susie, who was excitedly talking about her birthday preparations. Sometimes they laughed together, and I couldn't help but smile as I watched them. I tried to support her, help her, and do little things to show her that I cared. Sometimes I caught myself wanting to just forget about the suspicions that had been haunting me for the past few weeks. Because home is my fortress. And if arguments and mistrust start here, who will be left? But despite all the hustle and bustle and family warmth, there was still this little feeling of anxiety inside me, like a quiet voice that wouldn't go away. It reminded me that things weren't so simple, that behind this picture of family happiness, something else might be hiding. And I knew that sooner or later this anxiety would force me to seek the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. And I was damn right. Unfortunately, after about a month, I felt again that something was wrong. The feeling of anxiety and suspicion that I had been trying to get rid of returned with double force. Attention to details that I might not have noticed before became my constant companion. I saw that Jess was changing, and not just changing, but transforming into something else. At first, I noticed that she was spending more time on her appearance. She used to be natural, not making any extra effort, just simple makeup and a neat hairstyle. Now I would come home and see that she was wearing brighter makeup, looking as if she wanted to attract someone else, not me. It seemed strange to me, as if she had started playing someone else's game. Sometimes I caught her looking at me in the mirror, so mysterious, a little distant, not the same as before. And of course, her phone. For a while, she could sit next to me with it, not hiding the screen. But now everything is different. She seems to have learned how to hide her phone so that I can't see who is texting her or what they are writing. If I got too close, she would immediately look away, hide the device in her bag or in another room. It annoyed me. I felt everything inside me tighten with suspicion. In addition, I began to notice that our relationship had become cold. Before, intimacy was something natural, warm, almost a ritual that brought us closer together. Now everything had become rare and strained. Every time I tried to get close, she pushed me away, saying she was tired, had a headache, or just needed to rest. At first, I blamed it on fatigue. I had a crazy schedule myself, and I thought she was just exhausted. But over time, it became clear to me that it wasn't just fatigue. It was alienation that cut like a knife to my heart. I saw her trying to distance herself from me not only physically, but also emotionally. Then there were evenings when she wasn't home. She said she was going to professional development courses. But I couldn't understand why she needed courses in the evenings and why she wouldn't share any details, where, with whom, what they were teaching. Every time I asked, she answered evasively and irritably. I tried to be patient, but my patience began to wear thin. I started keeping track of her schedule, trying to remember when and where she was going, trying to figure out if she had a real reason to disappear so often. But with each passing day, the questions grew more numerous and the answers fewer. Thoughts, suspicions, and fears swirled in my head. I tried not to show it, but her every move made me feel uncomfortable. I lived as if on a ticking time bomb. I knew that sooner or later it would all explode, but I couldn't figure out when or how. And perhaps the most frightening thing was the feeling that I was losing her. The Jess with whom I had once built my life, and with her I was losing myself. I decided to find out everything. This couldn't go on any longer. After I started noticing strange behavior in Jess again, I decided it was time to find out what was really going on. In the evening, when she had just returned from another training course, I sat down next to her on the couch and asked, "Jess, please tell me, what kind of courses are these? Who is there? What do you do?" She smiled, but I saw a flash of fatigue and slight irritation in her eyes. "Nick, I already told you it's for work. They just want me to improve my skills, nothing special." I kept asking questions, trying to understand more, but she shut down like a wall. "Let's not talk about it now, okay? I'm tired." I didn't press her, but that only made me more curious and worried. One day I tried to look at her phone, hoping to find something that would explain her behavior. But the screen was locked, and I couldn't access it. When I asked her for her phone, she just smiled and said I was too jealous. I realized that I wasn't going to get any answers this way, but I wasn't going to stop there. One evening, Jess said she was going to visit a new colleague, someone named Betty. I couldn't even find out who Betty was or what she did at work. Jess was very secretive, answering evasively, as if she didn't want me to know too much. This immediately made me suspicious. Who was this Betty, and why didn't I know anything about her? I had a feeling that Jess was hiding something very important. At that moment, I decided that I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find out the truth for myself, but I knew that if I started following her right away, she would suspect me. So I let her go, gave her time to drive far enough away that she couldn't see me. I sat at home, mentally preparing for the trip. My heart was pounding, my thoughts racing between anxiety and anger. When Jess left, I got in my car and followed her. She drove for a long time, about half an hour. It was agonizing. I kept my distance, driving slowly so as not to attract attention. The same questions kept running through my head. Where exactly is she going? What is she doing at this Betty's place? What is she hiding behind her words? Finally, she turned onto a quiet street in a residential neighborhood and parked in front of a small house. I stopped on the other side of the road, trying to remain inconspicuous. The car was quiet except for my own breathing, which seemed too loud in the tense silence. I looked at Jess's car, at the doors that had closed, but no one came out. I waited, thinking maybe she had just paused, waiting for someone. Time passed, 15 minutes went by, and the door remained locked. I was starting to lose patience and was about to leave when suddenly a man got out of the car. The moment his silhouette appeared against the headlights, something inside me burst into flames. I felt the blood rush to my head, my palms clenching into fists. This man, it had to be him. The very same Eaton who was the subject of rumors. The one who seemed to have already appeared in our house, in our lives, like a shadow. I imagined raising my hand, ready to strike, ready to destroy him without hesitation. But then another thought rushed into my head like a cold shower. Stop! If he just got out of the car, where's Jess? She couldn't have driven separately. I looked closely at the car, at the license plate, at the shape of the body, at all the little details I hadn't noticed before. And then it dawned on me. It wasn't her car. I had lost her somewhere along the way, mixed up the cars. At that moment, I felt a wave of despair and self-criticism wash over me. I felt stupid, blind, and deceived by my own suspicions. I stood in the car with my head down, trying to calm my racing heart, and thought, how could I have been so wrong? How could I have allowed myself to believe that? But at the same time, there was an unquenchable feeling in my chest that the truth was somewhere nearby, and that sooner or later it would come to the surface. I returned home and immediately felt the tension inside me. I sat in the living room going over the events of the last few days in my head, trying to figure out what to do next. My heart was pounding as if it were about to jump out of my chest. I waited for Jess to come home as if I were awaiting a sentence. When the door opened, she walked in looking as if nothing unusual had happened. A slight smile, her usual gait, her usual evening attire. She seemed to carry no burden, no secrets. But something immediately alerted me. I caught a scent. It was unfamiliar, sharp, heavy, and masculine. A scent that could belong to no one but another man. Suddenly, all my suspicions took shape and echoed loudly inside my head. I couldn't keep quiet and, trying to sound calm, said, "Jess, where did that smell come from? Have you been somewhere? With someone?" She stopped, looked at me with slight irritation as if I had asked the stupidest question in the world. "Nick, stop it. You're just being paranoid. You have too much imagination," she said, tilting her head slightly and looking away. I didn't give up and continued, my voice a little more tense. "You think I don't notice? It smells like a man. I'm not an idiot, Jess. You're hiding something." She sighed and took a step toward me, as if trying to diffuse the situation. "Listen, I'm tired of your suspicions. You're making up stories where there aren't any. You just can't believe that I can be busy without telling you every little thing." I felt anger boiling up inside me, but I tried to control myself. "You don't tell me. That means there's a reason. What's going on? Who is this man? Or are you afraid to tell me?" She recoiled sharply, her eyes filling with coldness. "Enough. I don't have to explain myself to you. If you want to continue doubting and tormenting me, that's your problem." We stood facing each other, the air around us filled with tension. I knew that a war was about to begin, and I couldn't just back down. She left the room, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. I was left alone in the living room, in this empty, cold space, where only my thoughts grew louder and more insistent. The silence was oppressive, and it seemed that every sound of my breathing tore the silence apart. My head was splitting with endless questions. What's going on? Where is she going? Why can't I get an answer? I sat there all night, replaying every moment, every word she said, every move she made. Everything seemed strange to me, as if I were living in a movie where the main character gradually learns the truth but can't stop until he gets to the bottom of it. At some point, I realized that I couldn't wait and wonder anymore. I had to take matters into my own hands. I had to know the truth, even if it was bitter. My resolve was ironclad. I sat down at the table and started planning how I would hack her phone. Jess had always been careful. She used complex passwords and was very protective of her privacy. But I knew her habits and weaknesses, dates, names, events that she might use as passwords. I remembered our first vacation, our wedding, our birthdays. All of this could be the key. I was already going over the possible options in my head. My heart was beating faster, adrenaline filled my body. I understood that this was an invasion of privacy, a betrayal of trust, but I couldn't get rid of this poisonous doubt any other way. I got up, went to her room, carefully took the phone that was lying on the table, and with light but decisive movements began to enter the passwords. At that moment, I felt like both a hero and a traitor. But a voice inside me said, "You have to know the truth, for yourself, for us." When I decided that simply guessing the password and looking at the messages wasn't enough, I realized that I needed the whole picture. I needed to know everything that was going on, even if she tried to deceive me or hide from me. To do this, I decided to use my knowledge and experience to create and install a hidden program on her phone. I'm an engineer. Programming and working with devices isn't just a job for me, it's part of who I am. I grabbed my laptop, connected Jess's phone via USB, and started preparing. First, I wrote a small script, simple, almost invisible, so as not to overload the system and arouse suspicion. It was spyware that could track messages, calls, photos, and geolocation in the background. I carefully thought through every step. The program had to run quietly without pop-ups or notifications. I used my knowledge of mobile security, took ready-made modules from trusted sources, and supplemented them with my own developments. I spent several hours sitting there, configuring scripts and testing them on my phone to make sure everything was working smoothly. When the program was ready, I carefully installed it on Jess's phone, taking advantage of a moment when she left her device unattended. Everything went quickly. No glitches, no suspicious changes in the phone's behavior. Now I had access to her personal messages, photos, and geolocation, all of which was collected and transmitted to my laptop in real time. I could see where she was going, who she was talking to, what she was writing, and even what pictures she was taking. It was my secret weapon. Now I could follow her every move and uncover the secrets she had been so determined to hide. I quietly sat down on the couch in the living room, trying not to make a sound so as not to wake Jess. She was asleep in her bedroom, and I was left alone with the cold light of the laptop screen, which seemed like the only source of life in the room. The darkness was oppressive, but I felt a strange calmness in it. I was finally ready to learn the truth. My fingers trembled as I launched the program, which silently connected to her phone and began downloading data. Messages, photos, calls, geolocation, it all started appearing on the screen. The first thing I saw was a conversation with a man named Ethan. Their conversations were candid and flirtatious. "You look amazing today. I can't wait to see you," he wrote. "Thanks, I like you too," Jess replied. I felt cold. I kept reading. "Last night was fantastic. You're special. I've been thinking about you all day too," she wrote, and I watched my trust crumble into pieces. Then came the photos. Pictures of her in lingerie, half naked, smiling like she had never smiled at me flashed across the screen. Each photo seemed to scream that she was no longer mine. Next came plans for our next meeting. "I'm going to my mom's tomorrow. I'll be gone for a couple of days," Jess wrote. "I can't wait, I have a surprise for you," Ethan replied. But I knew it was a lie. I looked at the map. Instead of her mom's house, she was at a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. The keycard entry log confirmed it. I saved all the messages, screenshots, and geolocation data. It was cold, hard proof of the betrayal that was destroying me from the inside. I sat in the dark, tears burning my eyes, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. There was no room for doubt in my mind. Now I knew the truth, and it was bitter. I didn't sleep a wink that night. My whole body felt electrified, my thoughts racing, not giving me a moment's peace. I sat in the dark in the empty living room, and slowly, step by step, I devised my plan for revenge. All those conversations, photos, and lies flashed through my mind, burning so intensely that it felt like a fire was burning inside me. I wanted her to feel what I felt. I wanted her life to turn into a real nightmare, just like the one she had created for me. I wanted her to never be able to hide behind smiles and excuses again. I wanted every step she took to be filled with fear and regret. I thought everything through to the smallest detail. How to strike the blow from which there would be no escape. I wanted to destroy her illusions, to make her feel the cold and loneliness that were now my constant companions. Every hour in the darkness strengthened my resolve. I knew it would be hard, it would be cruel, but there was no other way to regain my dignity. That night was the beginning of my plan to change everything between us forever. Morning burst into the house with a sharp light seeping through the curtains. I woke up on the couch in the living room where I seemed to have dozed off accidentally, trying to get some rest after a sleepless night. Thoughts were still swirling in my head like a hurricane. My plan for revenge was spinning and spinning, gaining momentum. Jess entered the room, looking a little surprised, and immediately asked, frowning, "Nick, what are you doing here? Why aren't you in bed?" I quickly gathered my thoughts, knowing that it was too early to reveal everything I had learned and how I felt. "I just fell asleep here. I had a lot of work to do yesterday and didn't make it to the bedroom," I replied, trying to sound calm. She nodded, but a slight look of concern flashed across her face as if she sensed something but didn't know what. I sat there, clutching my cup of lukewarm coffee, trying not to betray the storm of emotions raging inside me. The room was filled with the usual morning bustle, the sound of the coffee machine, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the quiet trickling of water from the tap. But to me, it all seemed fake, as if against the backdrop of normal life, I was being consumed by an internal fire. I didn't ask her about that strange night, didn't reproach her or ask questions. It was too soon. Now I had to wait, prepare, think through every step. That sleepless night gave me only one thing: clarity and determination. I decided that my revenge would be cruel, precise, and merciless. I wanted Jess to feel the same betrayal that I had felt, and I would act when the time was right. As soon as Jess left for work, I immediately immersed myself in my task. It was no longer just a matter of gathering compromising information. I was turning it into a real multi-step, cunning, and well-thought-out plan, designed to be carried out in several stages. I understood that the truth alone was not enough. She had to not only feel guilty, she had to lose everything that had been her support. I went back to her messages, photos, calls, and geolocation data. I studied every detail, every name, every phrase. It wasn't just evidence, it was the building blocks for destroying her illusions. I started making a list. Who these people were, who she was seeing, what they were doing together, where and when. I quickly ran some of the names through social media and mutual acquaintances, leaving others for later. Everything had to fit into a coherent picture that would leave her no chance. At the same time, I was thinking about how best to use this information. I didn't want to reveal everything at once, but rather stretch out the process so that she would live in constant fear and uncertainty. I wanted her to feel the coldness of loneliness and understand that none of her moves would go unnoticed. It was more than just revenge. It was my attempt to regain control of my life, which had been destroyed by deception. By evening, I sat down in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee and, for the first time in a long time, felt that all my thoughts were beginning to form a clear picture. This plan wasn't just an idea. It was a weapon, and I was going to use it with surgical precision. The first stage was crucial, to make Jess believe that everything was as it had been before. To make her relax again, stop being afraid, stop hiding her phone, and stop threatening me with her coldness. So I did everything I could to behave perfectly, just like when we first started dating. I got up before her in the morning, made coffee, cooked eggs, and set the table neatly. I saw her look at me in surprise, as if thinking, "What happened today?" "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "How about we try yoga together? They say it helps relieve stress." She smiled and nodded, and that was a small victory. Her relaxed smile. I watched her every move carefully, noticing how she hid her phone less and didn't close the screen when I was around. Her behavior became less guarded, and I took that as a sign that my first move had been successful. While she was busy with her own affairs, I quietly and methodically did what was invisible to her, but extremely important to me. I copied all her messages, photos, and locations. I saved them to an external hard drive, which I hid in my study. At the same time, I made backup copies on an encrypted USB flash drive disguised as accounting documents and uploaded copies to the cloud under a fake account. Now I had complete control. Every move she made, every lie she told, every meeting she had, everything was recorded and saved. It was like a secret dossier on her, and I knew that when the time came, it would be a weapon that would work flawlessly. I sat in the dark, feeling the tension slowly recede, giving way to cold determination. That evening was the starting point, the moment when I stopped being a victim. Now I was the hunter. The second stage of the plan was the most delicate and the most difficult. I decided to destroy everything that Jess's life depended on, namely her career. She was proud of her work, her reputation, her independence. I was going to destroy all of that. I started by gathering the most convincing evidence. Screenshots of her messages with Ethan, photos that couldn't be erased from memory, pictures of their meetings, intimate moments where she was clearly not playing the role of a wife, but was with someone else. When I had everything ready, I wrote a letter. I included all these treasures and signed it with one sentence. "You wanted to play, here's your level of difficulty." I sent the letter to Ethan first, to his personal email. It was a challenge. I wanted to see how ready he was to play. Then I sent it to the HR department of the agency where Jess works. I wanted her to have no chance of saving her career. And finally, to her department head, so that there would be no doubt that her deception would be exposed as loudly and painfully as possible. I knew the consequences would be devastating. It would be a blow to the very heart of her life, not only making her feel guilty, but also destroying the shaky foundation that had kept her afloat. Now I was waiting for the moment. But I was ready for anything. This was my plan, and I wasn't going to stop. I knew I couldn't just drop the bomb and walk away. I had to choose the moment when the blow would be the hardest. I kept a close eye on Jess's schedule. She told me she was preparing for an important presentation of a new project that was due in a few weeks. It was her big chance, something she had been working towards for months and could take her career to the next level. I decided to wait for that day. The whole house felt tense, as if it were anticipating a coming storm. I pretended that everything was fine and continued to play the role of the caring husband, but inside I was boiling. When the day of the presentation arrived, I struggled to contain my emotions. I knew that Jess would be under maximum pressure at that moment, and that was when her world would come crashing down. I watched her get ready, feeling her confidence and slight nervousness. She didn't know she had already lost the game. And then, when the first questions and whispers rang out in the hall, I knew it was beginning. I had prepared carefully for this day. I knew that I couldn't just send the letters in advance. That wouldn't make sense. To deliver the maximum impact, I had to catch her at the most crucial moment, the moment when all eyes would be on her, at the presentation of her new project. In the morning, I had breakfast while watching Jess get ready excitedly. She discussed the final details, rehearsed key phrases, and chose her words carefully. Everything seemed so ordinary, but in my heart, I was coldly determined. I checked the emails again. Each one contained screenshots, photos, correspondence. Nothing had been missed. The addresses of HR, the manager, and Ethan. Everything was ready. All day long, I kept a straight face and spoke to her calmly, as if nothing was happening. Deep down, I was counting the seconds. When the clock on my wall showed that it was time for the presentation to start, I sat down at my computer. My heart was beating faster, my palms were sweaty, but my fingers were steady. I pressed the send button. At the very moment Jess was showing the first slide, the letter was already flying through the inboxes of her colleagues, HR, and Ethan. I imagined people in the room starting to receive the emails, looking at their screens, whispering about what they saw, Jess's face changing, first surprise, then shock, then fear. I knew she wouldn't be able to concentrate, that this moment would be the beginning of the end for her. I sat there watching her world begin to crumble, feeling that my plan was finally coming to fruition. The result was almost instantaneous, and I couldn't hide my satisfaction as I watched everything unfold according to my script. Ethan was the first to take the hit. I didn't have to spread the dirt myself. Someone anonymously posted it on Reddit with screenshots and photos attached. The post quickly gained views and comments, and within hours, his name went viral in the industry. He was labeled toxic and unreliable, and some even said he was dangerous to deal with. His position at the agency was called into question, and within a couple of days, he was fired. It was the first major blow to my plan. At the same time, Jess received a call from HR. I heard them invite her in for a talk. She tried to hide her anxiety, but I could see her confidence crumbling under the barrage of questions. Her messages, where work issues were mixed with flirting, were now the main cause for suspicion. The agency didn't dare fire her right away. It wasn't just an act of mercy, it was torture. Jess was removed from all projects, but her salary remained the same. On the one hand, it seemed like a blessing, but on the other, it was torture. You're kind of there, but it's like you're not. An empty space, no one looking at you, no one expecting anything from you. She tried calling her coworkers, asking for help, trying to figure out what had happened, but no one would talk openly. Walls of silence surrounded her. I saw her crumble under the weight, something inside her breaking. And I knew it was only the beginning. While she tries to figure out how to hold on to what's left of her life, I continue to work on the next stages of my plan. She had no idea that I knew everything. Nothing at all. Jess continued to talk to me as if I were just her husband, not the man who held her whole world in his hands. She complained, told me that her boss was a complete jerk, that everything at work was terrible, that they wouldn't let her do her job properly, that she was nervous because of the constant pressure. "He's just squeezing everything out of me, Nick. I'm tired," she said, and I listened silently. Inside, I was so angry and bitter that at times I felt like I was about to explode, but I didn't show it. She had no idea that this was all part of my plan, that I was the one who had set it all in motion. Every day, we lived under the same roof, talking as we always had, but there was now an invisible wall between us. I was there, but my mind had long since wandered elsewhere. I lived in this double world. On the outside, a calm, caring husband, and on the inside, a man preparing for ultimate revenge. It seemed to me that simply ruining her career wasn't enough. I wanted everyone around her to know who she really was. I wanted her beautiful image on Instagram, with all those posts about love, family values, and being the perfect mother and wife, to be shattered into pieces. I spent a long time gathering material. I scrolled through her profile, downloaded photos, copied captions. She skillfully crafted her image, smiling with her daughter, holding my hand, writing about family happiness and the value of sincerity. It was all a lie. Then I superimposed screenshots of her correspondence with Ethan on these photos. These were not just words. They were candid phrases, intimate selfies, hints of meetings. The collages looked like a cry of truth, straight in the face of all this deception. I realized that just posting this on social media would be too harsh. It could quickly be taken down, blocked, or dismissed as slander. So I decided to do it carefully. I sent these collages to a private chat group of mutual friends and colleagues, supposedly by mistake. I knew that among them, there would be those who would quickly spread the information further. The reaction was instant. The chat exploded with messages. People discussed it, forwarded it to each other, wondered if it was true. I heard whispers behind my back, saw looks full of condemnation which were now directed at Jess. She didn't understand what was happening, couldn't connect the conversations to herself. Her friends and colleagues began to distance themselves. Some stopped responding to her messages. Others became cold and indifferent. She tried to justify herself, saying it was a dirty game that someone wanted to ruin her life. But no one believed her. Her world began to crumble before her eyes. I saw her become withdrawn, frightened, as if she understood what was happening but was unable to change anything. At that moment, I felt that I had achieved my goal. She was left alone, with her reputation in tatters and her relationships destroyed. After the compromising material began to circulate among their mutual circle, Jess's life began to fall apart before our eyes. One of the first consequences was the cancellation of her bachelorette party. She had been looking forward to it so much, dreaming of spending time with her friends and feeling happy before her wedding. But everything fell apart. The organizers began to back out, and her friends seemed afraid to be associated with her. It felt like everyone had turned their backs on her, as if she had suddenly become an outcast. But that wasn't the worst part. I sent the same folder with compromising material to her parents in advance. I signed the message simply and clearly. "This is hard for me, but you need to know the truth about your daughter." The reaction was immediate. Her parents, with whom she had always had a warm relationship, became cold. They stopped calling and responding to messages. In conversations with them, I sensed tension and confusion. They seemed unsure how to react to this storm, but preferred to distance themselves. For Jess, this was another blow. Not only had her friends and colleagues turned their backs on her, but her family was also keeping their distance. At that moment, I knew my plan was working and I was on the right track. Her life was slowly but surely turning into emptiness. I was at home that day when Jess ran in as if someone were chasing her. The door flew open and she barely had time to catch her breath before she started talking. "Nick, please listen to me. You have to understand this is all a mistake. I've been framed. It's some kind of dirty conspiracy. I didn't do anything, I swear." Her voice was shaking, her eyes were red. She was wiping away tears, but at the same time there was a glimmer of desperate hope in her eyes. She hoped I would believe her. I sat motionless, staring at her, catching every word, every movement. Inside, I was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, the desire to strike back. But on the outside, I remained calm, almost cold. "Jess," I said quietly, trying to sound sincere, "I want to believe you. We'll get through this together. You're not alone. We'll find out who did this." She seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Her voice grew quieter, trembling, but she continued. "I haven't been hiding anything, Nick. Why would I risk everything for some fleeting fling? It's not true. It hurts that you doubt me." I nodded, patting her shoulder to show my support. But deep down, I knew she had no idea that I had already seen all her messages and photos, that I knew the truth. At that moment, I decided that I couldn't let things slide any longer. As long as she believed in my support, I could control the situation and make a plan to ensure her downfall was final and irreversible. I let her feel that she could still rely on me, even though I was actually one step away from destroying her life. That moment was a turning point for me. I went from being a hidden observer to an active player who now knew exactly how and when to strike next. At the moment when all the pieces of the puzzle came together into one grim picture, I sat in silence, watching Jess's life turn to ruins. Her friends, with whom she had so often laughed and shared secrets, disappeared like smoke. No one responded to their messages. No one invited her to meet up. She was alone on social media, and those who had once seemed close now passed her by as if she didn't exist at all. The job that had once been a source of pride and stability for her had turned into a cold HR office. They didn't fire her right away. That would have been too easy. Instead, her projects were put on hold, she was removed from important tasks, and her salary trickled in, but with no prospects. She was like a ghost, existing on the verge of disappearing. I knew that at that moment Jess was trying to find support in Ethan, the very man with whom she had had this whole affair. I followed her. She called him, wrote to him, tried to meet him, tried to get back at least some of the illusion she had. But he didn't just ignore her, he erased her from his life completely. He blocked her on all social media, blocked her number, didn't answer a single call. It was like a stab in the heart for her. The man she had risked so much for had turned his back on her and left her alone. I saw how she tried to fight this loneliness, how tears of despair flashed in her eyes, and how she tried unsuccessfully to pick up the pieces of her broken life. And at that very moment, sitting there watching it all, I felt that my revenge had reached its climax. She had lost everything, her friends, her job, her love. She was left completely alone, without support and without a future, which she herself had destroyed. For me, it wasn't just punishment. It was justice. Justice for all the lies, betrayals, and unscrupulous infidelities. And I knew that from that moment on, she would never feel safe again. Her life became my answer, cold, ruthless, and final. She was on the brink, completely broken, exhausted, almost out of her mind. There was no longer any confidence in her eyes, only fear and despair. I saw her trying to hold on, but she had no strength left. And then I knew it was time to end it. I had prepared everything in advance. I made sure her behavior looked inappropriate and dangerous to herself. I knew that if I called an ambulance with the right words, their response would be clear: hospitalization in a psychiatric ward. When Jess was home alone that day, I called emergency services and reported that she was acting erratically and threatening herself and others. The ambulance arrived quickly. I explained everything carefully, described her condition, added a few phrases about strange changes in her behavior, and mentioned her anxiety and depression. The medics listened carefully and decided that she needed to be hospitalized immediately. Jess was in shock. She resisted, cried, and screamed, but it was too late. They took her away, leaving me alone in an empty house where everything felt cold and unfamiliar. It was my last move, my way of closing this chapter forever. I knew that now she wouldn't be able to complain to anyone. No one would believe her. Her words would be dismissed as the ravings of a sick person. She was locked up in a psychiatric hospital, completely isolated from the world. At that moment, I felt that my revenge was complete. I had made sure that she had lost everything forever: her reputation, her freedom, and the chance to ever return to her old life. Now she could deal with the consequences of her actions herself. After Jess ended up in the hospital, I took Susie in. The little girl, who was only 5, was my top priority. I wasn't going to let her grow up in such a broken home, where her mother had betrayed not only me but our entire family. While Jess was locked away in a psychiatric clinic, I filed for termination of her parental rights. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew that Susie's safety and well-being were more important than anything else. I was prepared to fight to the end to protect our daughter. At the same time, I filed for divorce, officially ending this destructive marriage. Life without Jess seemed both frightening and liberating. My daughter and I moved far away to a place where no one knew our history, where we could start over with a clean slate. I wanted Susie to grow up in a normal, peaceful environment without lies, betrayal, or deception. The most important thing for me now is to give her the love and stability that Jess couldn't provide. And even though this chapter of my life was filled with pain and disappointment, I knew that a new, clean page lay ahead. One that I would write for my daughter and myself.